Kojima is one of, if not the, best game directors of all time. I think most people would agree with that. However, he is most certainly not one of the best storytellers in video games. His exposition-heavy dialogue, his one-note side characters often named after their unique quirk, as well as logic that is tenuous at best, have made Kojima's stories an acquired taste to say the least. Personally, I think Kojima has only gone downhill since Metal Gear Solid 3. Phantom Pain took the focus away from the narrative, and as a result created the greatest stealth sandbox that has, and most likely ever will, exist. While Death Stranding has returned to Kojima's cutscene and dialogue-heavy form of storytelling. I don't think the narrative of Death Stranding is good at all. The concepts are poorly explained, and the justifications for how things happen is even more illogical. And the less said about how the third act forces you to play through it in its entirety for 5 hours, the better. And some genuinely cringeworthy lines make Death Stranding Kojima's least compelling story to date. But the reason it's my least favourite story Kojima has ever made is because it doesn't have Kojima's most signature mark on it. All his usual tropes are present, introducing characters with their actors' title cards, scenes that are wholly absurd but presented with such self-confidence that it forces you to marvel at it. But as I said, Kojima is one of the best game directors of all time, not one of the best storytellers. He's one of the best game directors because all his stories could only be told through the video game medium. He purposefully writes his stories in such a way that a film or television adaptation would be utterly inferior to his games in every way. There is no possible way to adapt things like the Psycho Mantis boss fight or the showdown with the Sorrow in any way that would have even a tenth of the impact they do in their original state. And this is what's missing from Death Stranding's story, something that makes it uniquely a game. It's entirely possible to make a Death Stranding movie or TV show. It wouldn't be very good, but you could absolutely do it. The closest the game ever comes to this Kojima-ism is leaving the player to figure out how to cross the tar belt, and even then, the game eventually throws its hands up and gives you the answer. All of this is why Death Stranding was a game I wouldn't have even considered being in my top 10 of 2019. Until I replayed it. And by replaying it, I mean replaying it 1 2/3 times. For this video, I decided not to finish the game before writing this script. I stopped right after crossing the tar belt, which I consider to be the last good moment in Death Stranding's runtime. Instead, suffering through the third act again, I decided to turn around and reinforce the chiral network I had just built. And I then spent an entire weekend going around completing standard orders and leveling up facilities. I nearly got them all done, until I realised I'd been repeating orders due to the overly complicated UI, but that's a whole nother issue entirely. And over that weekend, I came to realise something. A Death Stranding movie would never work, because I had been thinking about this game all wrong. I had been mistaking the narrative for the story. What's the difference, you ask? Well, it's different to everyone, and most of the time the narrative and the story are the same. To me, the narrative is what drives the plot forward, and the story is what actually happens. Most of your time in an average Death Stranding playthrough is spent connecting the chiral network. The premise of Death Stranding isn't save humanity from extinction, instead it's reconnect a broken nation. So to me, the middle chunk of Death Stranding's oddly paced story is the actual narrative, the driving force that makes me want to complete the game. Reaching Amelie and stopping Higgs is just the justification given to Sam. This is because Kojima made the mistake of giving Sam a different motivation than the player. I'm more than content in reconnecting America. I couldn't care less about someone who thinks she's Princess Beach. And when I chose to look at Death Stranding in this way, after finishing a playthrough without my mind poisoned by the awful ending, I understood that Death Stranding is a story about connection, about reconnecting a fractured nation and drawing people out from their seclusion. A game where no one man could ever make the journey across America alone, where millions of other players help and guide millions of others in ways they could never imagine. How one small ladder could change the experience of a dozen others. a game about connecting not only the chiral, but the PlayStation network as well. It's not a grand tale spanning the continent, but dozens of more minor anthologies that creates an entire country. In a way, I'm the opposite of Sam, who states as late as Chapter 9 that he never cared about America, only Amelie, while I'm the exact opposite. I feel that the story is over. I'm only chasing after Amelie so she doesn't undo all the happiness I spread across the continent, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I emptied the entire clip into her when I was given a chance. I have to be honest and close this out by saying I don't think this was Kojima's intent. Any game that forces you to sit through unskippable end credits twice clearly assumes you're enthralled with it. I know that I've made some profound leaps in logics to justify liking this game, but I can't deny that my interpretation of Death Stranding increased my enjoyment and respect for the game more than any line of dialogue Kojima is capable of writing. While Death Stranding 2 looms on the horizon, I can't help but wonder what will be pushing me to finish it: Kojima's narrative, or the story that I write.